Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. Glad to have you back for another episode. Today's episode, I'm going to title it, Will You Allow Yourself to Be Successful? And maybe a better question is, how successful will you allow yourself to be? And so ultimately when I say that right away, the initial thing is, as soon as I say that, you go, what's he talking about? I'll allow myself to be successful. Like, I want to climb the mountains and be tremendously successful. And I want to share a conversation I had recently with a group of doctors, highly successful individuals. Some of you are probably listening to this right now that were part of that group. But it was this idea of like asking them to grow a certain time. And I challenged them with how big they would allow themselves to grow. And ultimately, the number that I gave them, and I challenged them on a number, I think every single doctor came back and said, well, I don't want to be that big. And, maybe I want to be only 3 times that, or a third of that. And so it's kind of interesting when I started thinking about that, and it really kind of set with me. I had this conversation on Friday with these doctors, and then I had, I kind of let it sit with me over the weekend. And the more I thought about it, I even challenged myself. I thought, what is my upper limit? Like, what do I challenge myself? So on this podcast, what I want you to do is I want you to just open like your mind for a second. So what happens is when people challenge us, especially about how much success we will allow ourselves to have, like, it's a natural tendency, especially for driven people. So you don't listen to this podcast if you're not driven. You listen to this podcast and you go, this is crap. Like, Eric, I will be, like, there's no limit that I wouldn't try to reach. Some of you are saying that right now, listening to this. And I'd argue that's not true. And I'd argue that you, believe it or not, have set a limit to where you'll allow yourself to be successful. And, the last few podcasts, I kind of talked about fear a little bit. And I talked about that, this fear holds us back. And so at the end of this conversation with this group of doctors, I said, why is it that you don't want an organization that big? So let's just so people can understand. Like, I'm gonna just go throw out a number that you can think through for a second. So assume it was $30 million. I mean, you say right now, Eric, I'm a $1 million dental practice. What do you mean $30 million? Now, like I said, don't get too scared. I'm just using a number. Okay, but watch it. Ultimately, as soon as I said 30 million, you went, holy moly, right? But well, I don't know how to do that. And, I wouldn't know where to begin. And I push back, like, you didn't know where to begin when you went to go to dental school. I mean, it was fearful becoming a parent. It's fearful hiring your first employee, first team member. I mean, it's fearful when we start thinking about, this is when I say things are for you. They don't happen to you. They happen for you. See, the difficulties you faced along the way, the difficulties and the challenges you face, and by the way, you should be challenging yourself. Those are the things that help you get to the next level. So let's go back to this $30 million example. By pushing yourself, let's assume, so this person says, okay, let's just say that you're the doctor listening right now and you go, well, Eric, I don't want a $30 million organization. And I say, that's not true. And you say, yes, it is. So I say, okay, well, let's talk about that for a minute. You wake up tomorrow. And let's assume that your conservative annual income is $5 million. That your conservative annual income is $5 million. Okay? And you work 0 days clinically, and you have this amazing organization. It's absolutely amazing. You've worked on culture, and you've worked on morale, and you've worked on taking care of people, and you've worked on doing the right thing, and you've just built this. I mean, people say, well, you can't do it. You can't make an organization that big and still take care of people. That's not true. Look at Chick-fil-A. There's a lot of organizations that grow large and still take care of people, still put quality first. So that's not true. That's just an excuse. So you have this amazing income. You have this awesome practice. You work 0 days a week clinically. You have doctors that, you have training for doctors. You have this amazing, beautiful organization. You come and go as you want. You travel when you want. And if I put you in that chair tomorrow, like you own that tomorrow, boom, like I just clicked a switch. No growing pains to get there. You just woke up and that's you. Would you want it? Would you want it? That's a fair question, right? Would you want that organization? I would argue most of you would take it. I would argue 95% of you listening to this podcast right now would take that organization. Okay, well then, what holds you back? What holds you back from having that organization? And what holds you back from wanting that? Now, don't get caught up on the 30 million. Please don't get caught up on that. The point is this. What are you allowing yourself to become? I was recently reading a book, and a guy named Gay Hendricks talks about the upper limit problem. And so it's the idea that we hold ourselves back from a certain limit. Like we only will allow ourselves to go so big, and then we sabotage ourselves. And I would argue, in a sense, dentists oftentimes spend time with doctors and they sabotage themselves by listening to people with limited beliefs and limited mindsets. Would you agree? We spend times, and I think that's one of the ways we self-sabotage. In this industry, dental industry, because if I went to another industry and I said, hey, we're going to try to grow to a $30 million organization, in most industries, people would be like, yes, of course. Of course we would. Then why else? What are we in business for? If I walked up to almost any other industry and asked them to go to 30 million, they'd be like, yeah, of course. What else are we doing? But interesting speaking, when I go into medical, when I go into a dental office and I say, hey, we're going to take this thing to 30 million, right away it's like, nope, can't do that. Why can't you do it? Now look, it might not be 30 for you. Maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 7. Maybe it's 2. I don't know what your limiting belief is, but what I'm trying to get you to understand is that you are actually, believe it or not, putting a cap on your own growth. And I've seen this my entire career. One of the things I've argued before, even on this podcast, is I've said, look, here's the thing you need to understand, that if I took you and I put you in a room of people doing $30 million today, your income in your practice would go up dramatically overnight if you just hung out with them for a day. And the reason why, it would move the limit which you believe you can accomplish. It would move the limit that you think literally this limit you've placed on yourself. Now, why have you placed it on yourself? Some people say we do it naturally. We do it through environment. We do it through, our upbringing. I think a large portion of it's fear. I think it's fear of the unknown, fear of what you don't know, fear of the challenges, fear of the work involved, fear of time. And it's interesting because, believe it or not, that person gets more time. I would argue the dentist that's working 5 days a week clinically, 4.5, and then spends another admin day is the one who doesn't have time. Now, when you hear this podcast, ultimately you might say to yourself, like, my gosh, like this guy thinks too much for me. Look, we all are different scales. Like, you don't need to think that big. And like I said, I was speaking to a very highly successful, driven group of doctors, and not everybody wants to be in that group. And I get that. But what I want you to do is still, there's a part of that day that I really want you to take out of this podcast today, because I was thinking about this and I said, my gosh, we all do it. We all stop ourselves. We all listen to a podcast called Dental Wealth Podcast thinking I want to be wealthy, and the exact same thing you want, you're fighting against. Aren't you? If I said to you right now you could be a billionaire, I want you to listen to me, like open your mind for a second. And I want you to be honest with yourself. If I said to you tomorrow that you could be a billionaire, how many of you believe that's true? How many of you listening right now believe you could be a billionaire? I'm going to say it, maybe one of you. Of all the thousands of people listening to this, maybe one of you. And that's the problem. So then the question is, then you've set a limit. Do you see that? Like, you've set a limit. And so when I say you have an upper limit problem, when I say you've capped yourself, you've capped your ability to grow, you've capped how successful you can become and how wealthy you've you can become, well, you'd have to admit that's true. You'd have to admit, and by the way, anyone who knows my heart and knows anything about me, I'm like, listen, the reason why you want to create that organization is so that you can have an organization that impacts lives and teams and people. And you want to be somebody, the significance, I think that dental practice is one of the most amazing assets in the world. And if you maximize that asset, the amount of lives you can impact and change, it's insurmountable. And yes, along the way, you can buy some really cool things. But the legacy, the ripple effect, I'm telling you right now, I believe your duty and your job is to take this thing and maximize it to its fullest. So if you don't think you can be a billionaire, then what do you think you can do? So you have a limit you've placed on yourself. And so what I would question you and say, why? What's the limit? What is that limit that you've put on yourself? And I would encourage you to think about that. And say to yourself, why am I putting that constraint on me? See, because we could move through all these, Well, Eric, I'd have to have a lot of doctors. Okay, well, we can create a doctor recruiting program. We can put capital around that. We can we can create a training program. We can create a retention. These things are all things we can manage through. See, if we look at it, we say, look, this is a problem. Part of me creating that kind of an organization is that I would need blank, 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 and we start working through it. And so that's something that can happen. Well, I don't want that, Eric. Why? No. What don't you want? Don't say you don't want that. What is it you don't want? What is it you don't want? Well, I don't want stress. Shit, we have stress no matter what. You got stress driving to work. You know what stresses me out? Someone asked me the other day, they said, what are you fearful of? And I said, not realizing my full potential. That's the one that keeps me up at night. Sure as shit ain't spiders. What scares you? What keeps you up? The only thing that I'm scared of is the idea that I would wake up one day. Like this idea that I wake up at like whatever age you want to do, 89 years old, and I'm sitting there one day and I'm like, I never swung for the fences. I played it safe. I was never willing to maximize. And here I am on this damn fixed income. I sure hope that they don't raise the price of bread because I'll be freaking destitute. Is that the life you want? Because I don't think you listen to this podcast for this. Your financial advisors convince you, well, we'll just put enough aside and we'll have this fixed income and that'll just make everything fantastic. We all limit ourselves. We all limit ourselves, don't we? The thing about this podcast, I was thinking about this, I was just like, man, people say that they don't limit themselves, but they do. They intentionally limit themselves. They intentionally limit themselves. And they don't allow themselves to reach the full potential. And I don't even remember I'm going to open my phone here for a second. Because, by the way, I think that if you, if you do have the ability to watch this on YouTube, I think you should. If you don't, you should, by the way, because look, there's an expression that I'll put out on video that you can see my, like, I get like really into this or whatever. It's a different visual experience. So look, I would encourage you to go back and watch it on YouTube. But I want you to, more importantly than that, I want you to think about this for a second. Like when you think about a guy like Elon Musk. We were laughing the other day because like, Eric, you really like Elon Musk. I'm like, yeah, I really do. Because I'm blown away by like, what do you think Elon Musk's upper limit is? How about Jeff Bezos? Bill Gates? Warren Buffett? What was Steve Jobs? They started the same way. These guys started at a garage. They didn't even have the same start that you had. The difference is what they believed they could accomplish. The difference is what they believe they can accomplish. And what I want you to hear on this podcast today, what I want you to really hear is, I want you to write this down if you have the ability to write down. And because I want you to know this, and I want you to write down, what is my limit? What is my limit? I want you to write down, what is my limit? Where's the place I'm stopping myself? And there's a number, by the way. If I threw out that I looked at your dental practice and I looked at the number, if you and I sat down together and I said, look, let's look at this number together. Let's look at that together. And we started to talk about this, and we started to really look at it. You would realize that you have an upper limit problem that all of a sudden. So for instance, let's just give you an example of what I mean. You're doing $2 million today, and I go, hey, $10 million. And you go, I don't want that. That's not true. It's not true that you don't want that. It's not true at all. I'll guarantee you that if I put you in a $10 million practice tomorrow, and I had the systems, because then I could afford a COO, then I could afford an executive team, then I would have I had CFO, I would have systems around you. You go, man, this is pretty good living. You do want it. So you don't want to do the work that it takes to get there. That's actually a different problem, okay? So what I want you to do is what is my limit? What is the potential that I'm willing to allow myself to have? And then what's stopping me from raising through that number? What is the thing that's stopping me? Why do I believe that I can only accomplish that? Why is it that I believe that's my limit? Why do I believe that I can only have a $20 million dental practice, a $6 million dental practice? Why is that my number? Who told me that? By the way, someone once upon a time, if you had never met a dentist and you started opening your dental practice, you would find very quickly, if you never had any influences around you, I guarantee you your practice would have probably done 4 times what it does today. The only reason I would argue this to the death. The only reason you've limited your practice is because you looked around at all these people that don't know how to run dental practices and you watched them. And you assume that success is $1.5 million in revenue. I'm not trying to be difficult, but by the way, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I really am not. I'm trying to challenge your own thinking. No difference that I challenge my own thinking. Because here's the thing is, most of you, right, we don't know how much time we have on this planet. But see, I believe in leadership. And the reason why I call this company Tower Leadership is because I believe in leadership. I believe one of the things that's lacking in dentistry is leadership. I'm not talking about the president of so-and-so council. I'm talking about serious leadership. Serious leadership. People who are driven to not do it the same damn way over and over again. That look at this dental practice and go, look, this is an opportunity. I have an opportunity to build an organization like no person's ever seen, and do it, and not because I'm trying to turn it into some DSO profi mill thing that I'm trying to take every margin out of everything and commoditize a service. I'm talking about building an organization. By the way, I'm not knocking DSOs either. I'm saying the people that would do that. I'm saying that you can build a organization. We have a negative connotation even when it comes to multi-location sometimes, that they don't take care of the patient. That's not true. There's a large hospital chain here in Atlanta does an amazing job, treats me better than if I went to a small clinic. It's not true. It's a self-imposed limitation. It's not true. So I believe in leadership. I believe what this true industry is lacking is great leadership. And I know that if you allow that upper limit problem to be removed, if you actually look at it and say, why should I push through? Maybe that's a better question, or maybe a better thing for this podcast is, why should I push through? That's the compelling reason, get it? That's the compelling reason. That's what gets your ass out of bed in the morning and gets you psyched up and pumped up and you're ready to go, because you look at it and you go, I've got a duty, an obligation to take this thing and take whatever limitation someone told me I can accomplish and throw it to the wind and say, look, there is reasons why I haven't accomplished what I can possibly accomplish with this practice. One reason is because I spend too much time in the dental chair. I get out of the dental chair so you can actually run this business like a business. The other part about this is saying, look, I've got to be able to take this thing, why do I want to create this? Why do I want to build this thing? And what's my limiting factor? The limiting factor is you. Because I guarantee you, we're watching right now the amount of revenue that's coming, the amount of capital coming into dentistry is because this is a prosperous industry. It's an amazing industry to be part of. So because of the fact that you're in an industry that's prosperous and doing well, you might as well take advantage of it as a dentist, as a dental-owned, corporation where you can build and do awesome, amazing things. There's a reason why. See, the problem is someone sold you along the way that, hey, you could just buy a Mercedes or buy something. And look, you can already go on vacation. You can already buy the car. And so you set that as your success limit, is I can go on vacation and buy some nice things. And because that was your driving force, you never really accomplished more than that. I want to be able to go to the country club on Friday, Eric. I want to be able to get a nice car, and I want to be able to go on vacation. Hell, you were able to do that in the first 3 years of business, and you're like, okay, well, now my upper limit problems are about right here. And so you don't find a compelling reason why. See, I think first you have to identify, what's my limit? Second, I think you need to identify, what's your compelling reason? See, because there's fear. There's fear involved. Fear of losing it all. Fear of stress. Fear of lack of time. Fear of how it influences and impacts your relationships. And I can show you both mathematically, qualitatively, and quantitatively why that's not true. But that fear is what's holding you back from reaching the true potential. The true potential of this practice. What it can truly do. And when you realize that you've actually put this cap on yourself, when you realize and say, look, I have put a cap on my God-given ability to do awesome, amazing things, that I capped myself. Why? Hell, maybe I looked around and I went to a dental convention and I started finding all my friends and I looked at what they did. And I only, believe it or not, can you believe that some dentists, this is a true fact, some dentists will only go like so much more successful than their friends? Is that a possibility? So for instance, all your friends are doing $1.5 million in revenue and you go, well, I don't actually want to do 5 million because then my friends would almost they'd no longer want to hang out with me because I'm in like a different league. Do you think that's possible that somebody would self-sabotage themselves that way? Happens all the time. Happens all the time. And so what I'm telling you is people are self-sabotaging yourself. Like people put a limit on themselves and they put a cap on what they can accomplish in this world. And why do I get so psyched up about this? Why am I doing a podcast about this? I mean, we could talk about a lot of concepts on this show. I mean, I've got a gazillion things that we could talk about. We can talk about how to grow revenues in a gazillion different ways. Why am I talking about this? And why do I spend so much time on this podcast on mindset? Because that's what it's all about. See, I realized a long time ago, I was like, look, what people don't realize is that if I don't help someone become a better leader, they'll never have the organization they wanted. If I don't help someone become a better leader, it will all fall apart. That's why it's called Tower Leadership, because I believe in creating leaders. Well, Eric, what does that have to do with upper limits? Everything to do with upper limits. As a leader and as a steward of capital and as a leader of your family and as a leader of your institution, and you say, my job, my ethical obligation is to take this organization and find a compelling reason to maximize this thing to this full potential. And if I won't, then get out of the way, let somebody else do it. Because I'm telling you, what a dental practice can do for your community, for your family, for your life, and for your legacy, you could never, ever even I'm telling you, it's unbelievable because you'll never truly understand the ripple effect. And what's happened is we've allowed ourselves to lower our leadership limit, lower our revenue limits, lower our wealth limits, and lower ourselves to what we're able to do. And by realizing that, and then finding out what is holding me back and then focusing on that. And I would create almost like this mantra, I'm getting pumped up today, fired up. And the reason I'm fired up is because I'm like, man, people need to get this. They need to get it. They need to understand. I've worked with some of the most successful people and this is what you have to get. Is that you've set a limit on your own ability to grow. And you listen, when's he going to tell me how to make money? I'm telling you how to make money. Change change your mindset around what you can accomplish. And so when we figure that out and then find a compelling reason why and make a commitment to yourself and make a commitment to say, I'm going to take this organization and then I'm going to absolutely maximize the entire world out of this so I can impact as many people as possible and do awesome, amazing things. And if you're not willing to do that, fine, bring in people in your organization who are. Yeah, maybe you still own it, but you bring in some people in your organization and you compensate them to help grow the thing. If you're not going to do it, get out of the way. Let somebody else do it then. Fine, bring some people in that help grow your organization. Because this is, I hope why you're listening to this podcast. I hope you're listening to it because you understand, like, look, if I truly want to break free from what the average person is doing, I have to stop acting average. I have to stop listening to average things and average people and average minds and average ideas thinking an average way. I have to realize that I'm putting a cap on my own self and my potential. I have to realize that I can accomplish so much more than I allow myself to accomplish. I need to figure out what's holding me back. I need to go after those things and analyze them and break them down one by one. And that's what we help people do. I mean, that's what you got to do. You got to get over those things. And then you got to find your compelling reason why. Why do I want it? And then you get your team psyched up about it. You get your family psyched up about it. You get everyone psyched up about this mission. And here's why this podcast is so compelling. There's a lot of you listening to this podcast who maybe tuned out at some point. Maybe it didn't hit you. Maybe it wasn't the right time for you to hear this. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe you're in the middle of some things and this message isn't hitting you. Sometimes, look, messages hit different people at different times. There's certainly things I've listened to over my life and I wasn't ready to hear the message, but when I was ready. But here's why I did this podcast today. There's someone listening right now who needs to hear this message. And I'm talking to you. And I want you to hear me, and I want you to hear what I'm saying. You have more potential than you ever could imagine. And if you take this practice and you actualize the true potential of it, the amount of lives you can impact and the amount of people you can impact, yes, you'll be able to buy everything along the way you want, but the amount of things you can do with this organization and the leader you can become, I'm telling you, will absolutely transform your life and everyone around you your life and then literally generations after. That's the ability and that's the power you have in front of you. Find out what that limiting factor is. Go analyze it and then wipe it away and increase that level and increase it. And even if you say, well, I'm not going to have an unlimited upper limit, but I'm going to increase my upper limit, it will help you in every area of your life. So get to work. Don't wait. Look, we just started a new quarter. This is a great time to get at it. Get at it, or we're about to go into the last, I guess we're not in the last quarter yet, depending on when you're listening to this, I guess, but we're starting it towards the end of the year. Look, depending on when you're listening to this, it doesn't matter when you're listening to it. Look, you can find this 12 months and you can pick any day. You can say September 23rd to September 22nd, you can pick any date and go after it and build and create. And we can help you. Let us know. Appreciate you guys listening today. Get after it, get action, become a leader. I'm telling you, this is the tool to take you to the next level. Appreciate it, guys. We'll see you next time.